We put Julie's bio up on the website, so her bio's out there, and you certainly can search the internet for her, LinkedIn her. So as I said in the opening, I tend not to read off of a script when I introduce people because I want to make eye contact with all of you. Okay, eye to camera contact with all of you. So when we looked for keynote speakers, we looked for energetic, exciting topics that we thought would be timely for all of you, and things that we thought that you would be interested in. And Julie came with recommendations. And when we talked to her in person and did the tech rehearsal, it really struck me. You can tell when you're talking with speakers during a tech rehearsal, which tends to be really kind of stressful because you're trying to get tech to work. She was so wonderful to talk to. And Julie, I'm going to tell them, even though I knew she was in pain because she broke her foot. So she's much better today and very perky. And I'm really, really looking forward to her presentation. So I'm not going to waste any more of your guys' time with me. I'm going to bring her on the stage. And here's Julie Everett.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. And yes, I broke my foot just a couple of days ago, so it's been quite the journey, learning to hobble around on some crutches. But regardless, it's been a great experience so far. I appreciate, like all of you have said, the organizers and the tech support. All of it has just been amazing, both as an attendee of the rest of the sessions and as a speaker. So hats off. I just think it's been a fantastic experience. So I'm a longtime PMI member and PMP holder, and also I have the ACP and then a bunch of other certifications. I have quite the alphabet soup. But as a project manager, I wanted to plan this great talk for you that met the time box and the scope. And as an Agilist, I wanted to talk about something that would be of value to you, the end user. So I went to my network and I collected some data. I did a bunch of polls. So over the course of a few polls, I learned in this big topic about at the Agile Project Manager, we narrowed it down to talking about what's really needed to be successful as an Agile PM. So that's where we are today. And just before we go on, I wanted to give a shout out to my chapter, the Florida Suncoast chapter. We're down in sunny St. Petersburg, just 5 miles from the Tampa chapter. So 2 very, very active chapters. So if you are ever travel down there or come down there, stop in and say hi. I can't say enough about the president there and the people who support us in the Suncoast chapter. It's just been an amazing experience to work with them too. So I broke this conversation, I'm going to call it, into 3 different sections. I'm going to call this sort of my high-level roadmap of how I hope this conversation goes. I want to ground us first by talking about why we need to have this conversation about agility in project management now. I'll provide a high-level toolkit on how to succeed as an Agile PM. And along the way, we're going to hear from some others in their journey. And I also want to hear from you. So we'll use the chat function in our tool to make this interactive in a shared space. And hopefully, as we are recording this, we'll pull out some of those information or those high-level notes from the chat. So hopefully the recording will highlight some of those things as well. So let's go back about a year and a half ago during the shutdown, when the world came to a full stop. All the initiatives, all of the project plans, in fact, our whole life was put on hold. Nothing was normal. All those jobs to be done just piled up. And unless you were writing science fiction, you probably could not have imagined this happening worldwide. Certainly I couldn't. There's a new acronym now being used today in business agility, and it's VUCA. You'll hear this a lot if you haven't heard this already. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a great descriptor because we are living in a VUCA world. As we started to open up, as the world started to open up, it wasn't all smooth sailing. We were still being buffeted around by the winds of COVID. Some organizations ended up being completely stuck, trying to find their way. Some things that seemed straightforward before were now riddled by complexities, and that blocked other value from being delivered. As we strove to get unstuck, organizations found they couldn't rely on their old thinking practices and tools. These familiar ways of working that succeeded in the past often didn't succeed in this uncertainty and complexity of this new low touch digital economy. And sadly, many limped through the downturn, and actually, many organizations didn't make it. However, some organizations did survive and even thrived. The survivors were the organizations that applied an unprecedented focus on lean operations, delivering customer value, and investing in employee engagement. And these are the principles at the core of agility. In fact, the anecdote for ambiguity is agility. So even if you didn't realize it, if you're working with an organization who survived the challenges of the pandemic, you experienced business agility, this ability to pivot quickly, excel at change, and competitively respond to the tides of a shifting marketplace. Succeeding in this VUCA world where agility is key means that the demand for agile roles and experience is substantial, and it's increasing. So if you're navigating a career move or you're just curious about Agile, this conversation's for you. As we explore this Agile Project Manager role, I hope that you leave this conversation rethinking how you can amplify agility no matter what your role is, and how you can become an active architect of a career in Agile. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. And as I tell you this story, I'm going to put some things on the screen that will also just sort of summarize them. But as I tell you this story about Sarah, a real project manager whose name has been changed, I want you to really take the view of the actual Agile project manager. You know, we've learned a lot. There were a lot of Agile conversations in these last couple of days, and we've learned a lot about strategies and different techniques and even personal skills. So I want to make this very personal to the individuals here today who are contemplating bringing in more agility into your role or looking at a different role. So Sarah was a real PM. She was very successful. She had a great reputation in the world that she worked, a lot of professional success. So her company decided to go Agile, which for them meant implementing Scrum with several teams. They didn't have any coaching support, but they had a lot of enthusiasm and optimism because they had great leaders like Sarah. So she had this great reputation as a project manager, and her leadership, who knew her well, she'd been with the organization for several years. They knew Sarah, but they were new to Agile. They decided to assign her as a Scrum Master on some of the most visible pilot teams in their experiment. So I didn't get a chance to talk to her until several weeks later when they called for some coaching support. And that optimism had changed dramatically. By the time I had a chance to talk with Sarah, her team was upset, her boss wasn't happy with what he was hearing, and the stakeholders were really avoiding her. I had the opportunity to sit down with her, and I just wanted to hear her point of view. And this is what she told me. She said, I attend every Scrum event. She wanted to make sure everything ran efficiently and stuff would be delivered on time. So since she knew all the people on the team, she assigned the tasks to the right people so that it would make sure that everything was running smoothly. She pushed the team every day to stay on track, and she made sure to step in quickly when decisions needed to be made so that there were no impediments. She also wanted to make sure that the team was productive and seen productive, and that the project stayed on track and within budget. So she constantly challenged them on their estimates, and she worked with them on increasing their velocity. I know that's an Agile word, but this is the idea of how much we're producing every increment. So she was really pushing them to increase these numbers. She told me privately when this was happening that she had gotten to a point where she felt the developers were deliberately inflating their estimates. And then they used whatever time they had estimated just to spite her, whether it was realistic or not. And because she was still a project manager in her mind, she put together a pretty detailed project plan. But when she would present it, everyone acted confused because she also had a product owner. And that product owner kept asking for feedback from the customer. And of course, that kept changing the plan. And so she really didn't know what she was supposed to be doing. When I met with her, she was telling me that she felt that no one appreciated how hard she was working. She felt invisible and isolated. She felt underutilized because she was no longer in the important meetings because that's where the product owner was. She said she'd never failed at anything, and she was determined to make this work. So when I heard that, I sat back and I asked Sarah if she saw herself as the Scrum Master of this team 6 months in the future. And she burst into tears. So even though the organization started making great progress in their Agile transformation, it was too late for Sarah. Shortly after my conversation with her, she left that organization for another opportunity. Now, Sarah's a real person. This was a real experience. The company lost an amazing team member and leader, and she was really upset about having to leave someplace that she worked with for a very long time. Now, it's a good ending. When I checked in with her recently, she was very happy with her move and doing very well. So while there is a happy ending for Sarah, this was a very tense, emotional time for a lot of people. And in the end, the organization lost this person, and they were on the verge of abandoning Agile altogether. So it's true, there was a lot that the organization could have done differently, but that's a whole other talk. And there's a lot of things that they could have done differently that were actually covered in these last 2 days. So let's take this individual, personal approach to this case study. This is where I want to use the chat. So in the chat, let's focus in and ask ourselves, what could Sarah have done differently to succeed? So go ahead and add your ideas in the chat. If you were observing this scenario unfolding in your own organization, no matter what your role is, what do you think Sarah could have done differently? Let's see what you all have to say. We'll give you a minute here to put some things in chat. Sonja better understood her role. Yes. Ask for more feedback. Ask the team members for input. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. Getting some training. A couple of comments on training and clear direction. I see find a mentor. More feedback. Nice. Receive some training. Very good. Decrease the expectations of herself. That's fantastic. Understanding the roles and the goals. Share the load. Ask what success would look like. These are great. Feedback loop. Very nice. More training, role clarity. That's great. And I think that we're kind of getting the gist of that. So fantastic. Previous lessons learned. Thank you for that one, Leslie. Good add. Change and adapt. Thank you, David. So I know that you have these great inputs, and I wanted to make sure that we covered a bunch of different people's expectations and clarifications as well. So this was another question that I took out to my network, and I reached out to people in leadership roles and in practitioner roles, and even those who were in the development team roles, to ask this same question: what kind of advice would you give an Agile project manager? So I'm going to show a few of them on the screen here and give you some time to read through them. These are just more things. These are just general feedback from others to what they might tell a new Agile project manager as they started in their journey. So we have Jane, who's a practitioner. That combo, that lethal combo, that PMP and the Scrum Master certification, which is fantastic. I think somebody mentioned this expectations of ourselves. So have some fun. Don't stop trying because any fear of mistakes. And then Om, who's a coach and is also very active in helping to change the mindset in the community in Tampa. Plans are worthless. Planning is everything. So somebody mentioned this adaptability, this idea of inspecting and adapting and getting feedback. And he mentions a little bit of a yellow flag on estimates, right? Taking a different approach when we're talking about Agile to what estimates would look like, and thinking about ranges and getting feedback and basing them on experience. Large-scale planning won't suddenly work by planning harder the next time. This is from a developer. It's a great point. And here's one from a leader over at one of the big four. This idea that we hear a lot of Agile project managers really focus in on velocity. Now, I come from Agile project management, so I understand this concept. Velocity was a number that I could use to forecast and to create release plans. And so that was a number that I kind of latched onto myself so that I could create some plans that I felt like I had confidence in. But as John is mentioning here, it's about learning how to use those numbers for the overall good of everybody. And then Pradeepa here makes a good point. I'll give you a second to read this one. She makes great points. And one of them really is about this courageous conversation and this ability to connect with people and telling the truth, right? Giving and receiving feedback in a way that's heard. And are all of the parties willing to be in that courageous conversation? So it's an interesting concept that that's a two-way street there. And then one of the feedback that you guys already put into your chat, ask more questions and give less direction. So I got a ton of comments like this, and I boiled it down to 3 things that I felt like were essential for the Agile Project Management Toolkit: mindset, planning, and interactions. So on my roadmap, I'm going to move into this toolkit. We're going to talk a little bit about the mindset, planning, and interactions. And along the way, you're going to hear from others as it's relevant. So I've got a couple of clips from other people who are talking. I'm seeing a comment that somebody can't hear. Is anybody else having that issue? Okay, great. Looks like somebody else is okay. So I want to run this clip from Carmen. She's a practicing Agile project manager, and she's got some advice for new project managers. Let's listen in.
Carmen, would you tell us what's some advice that you would give yourself as a brand new Agile project manager?
I think I would tell myself, just knowing myself, because I overdo things, I overthink things, to don't do that. Take it easy, learn it, let it, I guess the evolution of it, just let it happen and don't fight it. Listen to your team. Always listen to your team. Always take a pulse check. Listen to your team because they're the ones that are, the ones that are really helping with the transition of Agile. That would be the number one thing I would say is just listen to your team. Always take pulse checks on them. That's really important because if not, then Agile won't work, I don't think.
Nice. So if you were working with somebody who wanted to become an Agile project manager, what's the first thing that they should do in their learning pathway? What is the first thing they should learn?
I think just understanding the fundamentals of Agile, because there's a lot going beyond just the basics of what Agile is, and the different activities and the roles that people play. I think just understanding the fundamentals would be the first thing to start with. And then perhaps sync up with somebody, group up with somebody that's very fluent in Agile and just more, participate in some observations of how, they run projects using Agile. I think, I know you said one, but I could say two. Those would be the two things that I'd say that someone you should definitely start with.
That's great. No, I like both of those.
Okay. That's Carmen. I got her video posted out on YouTube. So if you are listening to this later and you wanted to revisit, you can always go out to YouTube and check out her short video there. So let's talk about this mindset. I think there's 3 areas in the mindset arena that I wanted to pull out. The first one is this idea of the growth mindset. This people with a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset enjoy challenges. They believe that their intelligence, their talents, and their basic abilities can be increased or enhanced through work and through dedicated effort. So essentially, potential trumps any past accomplishments. So even though we might find ourselves feeling like we are great with this growth mindset, this often shows up particularly in women who will not apply for a job when they don't feel like they've accomplished everything in the job description. So a growth mindset says that my potential is going to trump past accomplishments and I'm going to apply anyway. And they're going to focus in on this ability to grow and to learn and to apply their existing skills and characteristics and translate them over into a new role. This can also apply at an organizational level. We want to hopefully influence the people around us and the organization around us to have a growth mindset so that we start focusing on a culture and engagement that rewards potential and effort and not just past accomplishments, particularly as we move into team-based delivery like we see in Agile. One of the things about a growth mindset that is really fantastic is that you can reshape your own narrative. Now, recently in the Olympics, if you followed the Olympics, you might have seen and heard a lot of this personal narrative that athletes use quite a bit, because everybody has these moments of doubt. Everybody has these negative thoughts. But what an elite athlete will do is they're trained to turn around that talk track. And sometimes they need help. They might have a coach or a parent or somebody else in their support system that can help change that talk track around. So I have a quote here from Gabby Thomas, who says her coach, Coach Bailey, is so supportive. She's like a mother. She says, if you're doubting yourself, you can count on her to pick up the phone or be right there and talk to you for however long it takes for you to feel like a boss again. I love that. But in Tokyo, out there on that track or the field or the mat or the water or the wall, those athletes were on their own in the thick of it. And when they found themselves saying something negative to themselves, when they found that talk track that was turning negative, they had to stop and change it to a positive narrative on the spot. And it was sometimes something as simple as, it's too hot, I just can't do this. They would change their talk track to become, I know you're feeling the heat, but so is everyone else. So it sounds simple, but I think we can borrow a lot of the things that we hear and see in these elite athletes to just bring them back down to be a tactical support for ourselves. The next thing in mindset I wanted to talk about is the learning journey. Now, it sounds, again, easy because I am a learner. I love learning is one of my strengths. I'm constantly doing it. But I think what I really want to express here is that we really have to push hard to learn anything that comes across our path that we can express our curiosity about. And that helps us to shape the world in ways that we maybe are not familiar with. So my rule for myself, if something comes across my horizon 3 different times, I start diving into it. There's so much out there. It's like a tsunami of digital information, and everybody knows now that we're at our desk. So it seems like we're just getting this wave after wave of, virtual meetings or events to attend and different things to learn, which is fantastic. But for me, I'll typically find some theme every year and hopefully something that matches where my organization is going so that I can harvest what I'm doing and I can grow mentally and stimulate, and that they can inform each other. It's just what I do. I'll typically find one thing and kind of ride it out until the next new thing comes along. So in my personal journey, in the beginning, like Carmen mentioned, it was all about the frameworks. I learned a lot about the basic Agile frameworks, but as I grew and I matured in my roles, I started exploring complementary skill sets like design thinking and soft skills like negotiation techniques and nonverbal communication. So those are some things that I explored as I just continued on my pathway, because they're all related to agility. Now I'm consuming anything that's related to behavioral sciences and why we do what we do. Even though I have 20 some certifications, there's no cert for that, probably just maybe better emotional EQ. And then the last thing I want to mention is this idea of systems thinking with our mindset. And I bring this up because, again, this is something we can be intentional about. And we can borrow some techniques from product management and discovery and design thinking to visualize system thinking. So I won't go into them today, but I would encourage you to explore systems thinking tools like opportunity mapping by Teresa Torres or impact mapping. These are both visualization techniques that you can use to flex your systems thinking and go beyond a basic cause and effect to really explore all the subtle things that might go into a decision that's happening on your project. Systems thinking can be incredibly advantageous to an Agile project manager. And we're dealing with systems all the time, but really understanding how all of the parts affect the whole can help you in your day-to-day to make better informed strategic decisions. Another theme that we heard from both you and also the network that I reached out to with the polls was this idea of planning. We have to change the way that we think about planning. One of the things I want to focus on as an Agile PM is to learn how to articulate strategy. Your job as an Agile project manager is to ensure that strategy informs delivery and vice versa. So my friend and the great product leader, Ellen Gottessteiner, she simplifies Agile planning into 3 horizons: the now view, the preview, and the big view. The now view is your current work in progress. The preview is taking this look 2 to 3 cycles ahead. And that big view is painting the big picture and targeting business outcomes. So even if you are not positioned to be in that space, I really encourage you to go further so that you can get more information about the strategy and articulate it back to the teams. It's going to help position you as an entrepreneurial thinker and a strategic leader. So you might not be in your current role or your description, but push the envelope a little bit and see how you can bring back some of that strategy to your teams. The goal with any of this is to develop quick feedback, right? Another technique that you might use as you learn to articulate strategy is something like objective and key results. Or you might use Agile roadmaps, even product goals if you're using Scrum. These are all techniques that can help you articulate strategic goals to others. And at the end of the day, we want to focus on learning and growth of this outcome, this business outcome that we're working for, whatever you're building. We want to focus on that learning, and learning trumps perfection. Remember, we're living in this VUCA world. It's too fast. There's too much ambiguity. There's too much complexity to make a plan and just stick to it. So we have to constantly adapt and align our delivery with our strategy. That leads us to some adaptive planning. Now, in Agile, we still have dates. Budgets and dates can be great forcing functions. It's typically scope that's negotiable. And that's what makes it hard as an Agile project manager, because you need to be able to go beyond what people are asking for, or what a client might be asking for, or a stakeholder might be asking for, to really dig into the why. And that's where this little phrase, missionaries over mercenaries, comes in. This is from the great product leader who talks about, Marty Kagan, who talks about the idea that everybody can be a mercenary. Everybody can just do what we're told, do what we're paid to do, but the world needs more missionaries to evangelize and to ask the tough questions and to go further with some of the problems that we're trying to solve. So becoming that problem finder and not just doing the things that we're asked to do. That's this phrase of being a missionary over a mercenary. So planning is emergent. It's no longer once a year, and feedback is paramount. We excel at change. We don't just welcome change. We want to excel at change based on what our customers and our users are telling us. And as we move along our Agile journey, hopefully your organization starts to really understand this alignment with strategy that should inform delivery. And maybe some of the items on the list get whittled down to be the most value. That's what we're hoping for. Instead of pretending to make progress on everything, we're focusing in the most valuable things in these lean organizations. But sometimes what happens is we get that sweet spot of the team is finally in a sustainable fit pace and our organization is finally starting to cooperate. But we forget to look at ourselves. And we end up being the donkey in this picture. Did anybody ever feel like the donkey? It's just this idea that we have to also focus our time and talent on the most valuable stuff. And that may mean that we have to let go of some of the things that we did as a traditional project manager, because there are things in Agile at a tactical level that the teams and the product owner and the Scrum Master would do if you're using Scrum, or Flow Master, or the development if you're using Kanban. There are things that the team will do that a traditional project manager used to do. So now we want to focus our stuff. We want to enlarge our role. We want to escalate that role so that we're doing more important, more valuable things. And that can be hard to let go. You heard that in Sarah's story. It was hard for her to let go of a project plan. It was hard for her to let go of assigning tasks. She wanted to do that all for her team. So it was difficult for her to learn to focus in on the things that were going to be the most valuable for her, her team, and her organization. And I want to mention too that when we talk about metrics, we also have to start thinking about finding data that will give us information that help us make better decisions. And typically in Agile, what we're looking for is, do we have enough runway to land the plane? We want the reality of how much work is remaining. And then we have to be able to back out that scope, that negotiable scope, in order to meet the deadline. And so when we're making these trade-off decisions, we have to be very comfortable with saying no. We have to really work on our soft skills and our negotiation techniques, because it can be very compelling to say, sure, yeah, let's just put that in the backlog. I'll get to it. The last thing I want to say here is, don't say maybe if you want to say no. This is a skill unto itself. Kind of like that last point about targeting your own sustainable pace. We have to get access to users and data, and then use that data to make decisions so that we can create a world where we're working on the most valuable thing. So we want data. Data trumps anecdotes. We want data to help inform some of those decisions. The last thing I want to say about this, when we're talking about measuring what matters, if you go back all the way to those quick little snippets that I got from my network, somebody in there, I think it was Pradeepa, mentioned learning how to measure value. And really now, with this world, this VUCA world where things are so complexity, it's really difficult to validate anything until it gets in the hands of whoever is going to use it. So measuring value, that's just a guess until it's actually, something's actually in the hands of whoever is going to benefit from this thing that we're building, or the service that we're providing, or this project that we're delivering. So it's a different language, if you will, to get this feedback, which it's a big loop, comes back to inform your strategy. That strategy starts to inform your adaptive planning, and then you should be measuring what matters along the way. So it's this just constant loop. And the next thing in our toolkit is interactions. Now, I put this word radical collaboration. I use that specifically because I want us to think about almost no collaboration is too little. Go beyond, a meeting and make working events. We're so fortunate now that so many people have invested in technology, and we have all these great tools at our disposal to get feedback and record feedback and to share and make things transparent. So this idea of building this radical collaboration, this culture that the team trumps the individual, that we don't have to make decisions in a vacuum, and this just, eternal feedback, and then, forming that conversation that aligns with our strategy and planning that we talked about on the last slide. I like to call this growing social capital. At the end of the day, it's going to really be about your relationships. As an Agile project manager, you need to build trust with your leaders through transparency and courage and results. You'll build relationships with your stakeholders, and I like to say negotiate like your job depends on it, because it does. Strong relationships are really critical so that you can understand other people's motivations and interests. And if you have got shared resources, you may have to really negotiate for the highest value, the work that you're doing that's of the highest value, so that you can get the right people to do your delivery. And social capital with your team, building this relationship with your team, involving them. I think Carmen said it best. Agile's just not going to work if you don't involve your delivery team. And I think this is another area where Sarah, from our story in the beginning, probably struggled the most, just not wanting to let go of control. This idea, this concept of servant leadership, where she should bring things back to the team and let them have some autonomy. So it's a shift. It's a shift in our perspective, and it's a new set of verbs. But it's not just new language. It should be shifting our actions so we can empower people. So managing anything becomes enable. If you can manage it, can you shift that perspective to enable it? Can you empower people and enable flow? Decide becomes facilitate. Instead of making the decision, can you facilitate a conversation and get feedback from others? Determine becomes collaborate. So this idea, again, of this radical collaboration and leading others through this lots of uncertainty and ambiguity by making these really small little delivery increments, and then getting feedback to inform the next one. And then lastly is that the Agile PM is the shepherd of a new culture. You may be the only Agilist in your company. I've been there. I have been the one talking about small batch sizes and talking about using frameworks many times as agility and Agile frameworks becoming popular. So focus on your interactions and your engagement in your culture. Don't use the Agile Manifesto as a shield or the Scrum Guide as a weapon. Just in short, engage people to produce better results. Just keep that radical collaboration and that servant leadership in mind, and really focusing on better results and improved customer experience. And don't forget that our employees, our teammates, our customers too, right? Employees who are really engaged deliver better results. So taking everything back to that team. So here's my thoughts on 4 ways that an Agile project manager can contribute to a culture. I'm calling it my 4 C's. And let's check in with you as these come up and see if there's any others that you want to add in. And you get extra points if they start with a C. So while you're adding your thoughts, let me just talk through these. So the first one is this commitment to safety. Really focusing in on making sure that everyone has a voice, that it's a safe place to present alternative views, and that people who might not be extrovert or outspoken have a way to bring their voice to the surface. And that's where this collaboration comes in play. There may be other people who could influence, but are waiting to be asked. You may not get people who jump in with this collaboration. You may have to pull that collaboration, particularly if your organization is fairly new to agility. That also brings us to cultural intelligence. I have not worked with a company who has been in one region or face to face, not just because of COVID, but for a very long time. We have these geographically dispersed global conversations. And I think it's important as a leader on the team to make sure that we're really recognizing the different cultures at play, different proclivities at play, different personalities at play, and making sure we're really good social citizens, celebrating other cultures' celebrations and holidays, and taking some time out to making sure that we're recognizing the best in people worldwide. And the last one I'll point out before we go to our chat is this idea of having these courageous conversations, which can be tough. When things are going awry, it's so important to sit down and have that conversation, not an email, not a chat. Get on the video. If you are remote, get on the video and have that face-to-face conversation. And if you have to, impart some difficult news, do that with honesty and vulnerability and transparency. And that can be very tough. I've been in situations where, we want to make our team, just like Sarah did, shine and appear to be doing great. And sometimes we just have to be realistic about the challenges that are happening. Even if we're the donkey in that picture, sometimes we have to push back and say, I can't take on one more thing, or I can't handle this and I need some help. And being vulnerable in that space. So being a shepherd for the culture for your team and your organization, but also making sure you're speaking up for yourself and the things that you need. So let's check in here on our chat. I see a couple of great ones. Confidence, nicely done. Great C word. Convince, Julie, well done. I like that. There's a lot of stuff we have to do to persuade others in that soft skill side. Bobby says, extend some grace. Well done. A catalyst of change, curiosity, change management through retrospectives, continuous improvement, acceptance, and creativity. Nice. These are great. Curiosity, candor, very well done. Nice. I could go on. We could make our alphabet of C words that demonstrate different ways that Agile project managers can contribute to culture. Liz, thank you. Liz is bringing up inclusion. Fantastic segue to our next section that we're going to talk here too, and something that I'm even learning more about myself. All right. So let's check in here. How are we doing on time? Great. We're doing okay. As we go through on our little pathway here, I have a couple of videos I want to make sure you hear from some others. So it's not just me talking. And the first one is going to be John Bush. John is an experienced Agile delivery leader. That's just another phrase for an Agile project manager, if you will. The UK is starting to make actual job descriptions and things around delivery manager, and we're seeing it here in the United States quite a bit. He's also a hiring manager, and he works at one of the big 4 accounting firms, and he's got some advice for some aspiring Agile PMs. So let's hear from him. I think I messed up my, there we go.
Hello, John Bush, and I just want to talk a little bit about the role of the Agile Project Manager. He's got a lot of experience in the space, not only doing a delivery manager role, but also as a hiring manager. You could go back in time and you're moving into this Agile space. What would you tell your new Agile project manager self?
I think sometimes we forget to make sure we're staying in tune with the context of what we're doing, right? I always tell new Agilists, don't forget that the entire idea is to be able to try things and fail fast in the business with technology and with our teams. Fail fast, fail safely, get customer feedback. Those three things, I believe, are kind of the foundation of Agile. And none of those things that I just said are the words budget, timeline, or resources. Right? Those three words don't exist.
Now, I don't want to hate this, John, but I suspect when we started, we were some of the newer people in the business. Now, it feels like when somebody goes to search for an Agile Project Manager job, that they have to have all kinds of experience. So what would you advise somebody who wants to make that switch into Agile Project Manager but doesn't have the experience?
To focus on the skills that you build on. Like you, for example, a business analyst job is a great stepping stone to a more functional leaders organization. My organization, for example, we use the term functional product specialist at FBS. We combine that term with other organizations. And there are two levels of this. The first is our Agile analyst, and the second is which is pretty darn close to the product line. And the second is more the delivery lead for us. Okay, so we kind of use one as a stepping stone to the other. And I would say for anybody trying to get it, if you're struggling with not having the experience, find those stepping stones, right? They're out there. You just have to look for them.
Great advice. And last question, how do you bring what's an area of your life that you feel like agility presents itself?
Before I think we started talking here, we were briefly talking about my history as I own a sailboat, and I run a sailboat racing team. All those same concepts apply, right? Fail fast, try things, and learn. Measuring our results and then figuring out how to pivot. The culture of openness, transparency, all those things apply. So whether it's running a sailing team or whether you coach a little league baseball team, which I know is a big one for some of my peers, to how you parent, all these things theories apply. I think the more you learn about it, the more places you'll start seeing it apply.
Thanks for your time.
Hope you found that helpful. So this is John, and let's just move on here in our journey. So I loved his message about just begin where you're at. You may find these transferable skills should apply. A lot of the things that we do as Agile Project Manager as Project Manager should apply as an Agile Project Manager. There's still a very tactical role. But there's also this idea of the skill sets that we bring to the table, this soft skill set, right? The soft side of, I know we call it soft skills, but actually I think they're very difficult. This idea of communication and negotiation and transparency and influencing and culture and all of these things that we talked about with those 4 C's, all of those things will transfer no matter what the role itself is titled. And then I've also found that there's been great opportunities in my life that didn't show up under a traditional title. The title of the job wasn't at all what it turned out to be. And so kind of going all the way back to that growth mindset, if it seems interesting and the values of the organization align with you, go for it. If it's an opportunity within your own organization and you have the ability to amplify some agility, even in a different role, go for it, try it out. You're going to take all of that with you. What we want to do is to bust that status quo. We want to get people thinking about a new way of doing business where agility will start to, decrease the risk and the unknowns because we're delivering these very small increments with lots and lots of feedback. So opportunity trumps status quo. And then secondly, find your tribe. It's important that you find some support. I think a number of you mentioned it in the very first interaction where we're talking about what Sarah could have done differently. A number of you mentioned have a mentor. Carmen mentioned pairing in with somebody. We're so fortunate now to have things online and virtual that you can go to pretty much, any region and get involved with some things there. And your chapters are great sources to find other people who are on the same journey. I know I'm on a number of different LinkedIn channels and things as well. So while we're talking about this, I'd love for you to share your number one learning recommendation to others. Maybe there's a particular podcast or a blog that you follow that you think is the most interesting thing that you want to share, with others. As I talk about this next little piece around finding our tribe, let's get your input for others, what you would want to share for them. I like this picture, obviously, because I'm an animal lover, but also because I wanted to point out, somebody mentioned inclusion. I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of diversity and how important it is when we're thinking about systems thinking, we're thinking about growth mindset, we're applying agility, that we expand our thinking to make sure we're hearing from people who don't agree with us, who don't look like us, who may have a completely different opinion. So that diversity of thought, diversity of points of view, diversity of culture, especially if you're working with products that work across many different global or regional customers, but even internally now, since we have so many global organizations, really thinking about accessibility issues, diversity issues, and inclusion. And that can take so many different flavors. So you can check to see, like, is everything that you're reading, is everything that you're talking about something that you already agree in? Is there something that makes you uncomfortable? I'm okay with that, right? If I'm uncomfortable, I want to explore why. Is it new? Is it against my values? Is it something that's just a different way of thinking? And I think in our world today, there's plenty of things that we could come up with where we can have good, constructive debate and welcome diversity, and hopefully do it in a kind and compassionate way to make sure that we are really reflecting everybody's views and getting those voices heard. Then lastly, I wanted to talk about investing in yourself. Now, I think that it's fantastic if you're in an organization who has a good budget for training and for education and for opportunity. But we are running pretty lean right now as a world, and we may not have that opportunity. So I would really push that you use some of these great resources that people have put in the chat here. There's a couple here: Dare to Lead, hosting a book club, various SME events. Get involved with these things so that you can expand your vocabulary, bring some of your challenges to the table to discuss amongst your peers the best way to handle things, get that diversity of thought and point of view. And it's fantastic if you've got people outside your organization who can give you an objective look at something that you might not have seen otherwise. And then lastly, really consider finding ways to invest in yourself. And I recognize that not everybody's in a position to pay for their own certifications or their own training. So I obviously encourage anything that you can do, at a good economic break, like many of our chapter opportunities like this one. But one of the things that you can really do is think about your certification pathway. I know for myself, my certification pathway, first with the PMP and then with the PMI ACP, the Agile Certified Practitioner, were thresholds into career growth that I could not have achieved in any other way. Now, I followed those up with framework certifications like in Scrum, and I became a trainer. But it did take a terrific investment in myself. And of course, that affected my family and my schedule. But it was something that to this day, I'll never let go of my PMP. I feel like you could go to any country in the world and you can use your PMP. It will be of value. And I really am a huge supporter of the PMI ACP. I was in the very first beta class of the PMI ACP. And my trainer was a guy named Jesse Fuel, who was very involved in getting Agile recognized in the PMI world. I wanted to give you just a few minutes with him because he is still heavily involved in building bridges between Agile and traditional project management. You'll see his name and you'll see his output, and he was involved in this professional dev day as well. But let's hear from Jesse on what he thinks about some of the certifications that are available right now.
Project leaders, I'm Jesse, and I'm here to share with you a couple of thoughts about professional growth and development through certifications. My first industry certification was the PMP back in 2005, and it really proved to me that structured, validated learning can be really helpful especially if we're learning a new topic like Agile. And you don't have to go to another association necessarily to get that Agile learning. I had the privilege of serving, chairing the committee that created the PMI ACP certification. And today, it still remains not only PMI's first and longest standing Agile credential, but also its most generalized. It is framework agnostic and toolkit agnostic. Disciplined Agile certifications are a phenomenally awesome way for you to have a more structured introduction to different kinds of Agile practices. And you also might want to check out the micro credentials. There's one for hybrid Agile, and there's also one for org transformation. They're cheaper, they're more straightforward, and you can knock them out in the span of a couple of days. So you have at your disposal access to 3 different options for continuing your growth in Agile knowledge without having to leave the PMI family, a place where you already have member benefits, a little bit of discounts at the same time. So hopefully that can give you a little bit of confidence heading into your next phase of growth through certifications.
Somebody said Jesse is awesome. He is awesome. He's just a fantastic individual and has worked so hard to help broaden the conversation. And I've always remembered his advice about building bridges, not walls. One time he actually sat me down and told me to stop speaking Agile lingo. He said, I want you to go 30 days without using any Agile lingo. And it was some of the best advice I ever heard. And I really had to practice on moving away from my book knowledge into really active listening and empathy and bringing all those transferable skills that we've talked about into my current world and building those bridges and starting to just influence and amplify agility, where I was. Every step we take towards small feedback loops, more feedback, lean operations, employee engagement, customer success, every step is a step towards agility. You almost can't do it wrong. So I wish you well. I hope that you've enjoyed all of this, these different thoughts as we've come together at the end of this fantastic couple of days here for professional development. I'd love to hear, while you're forming your questions for me, what you're going to leave here with today. Just your top things, maybe things around your mindset, your planning, and your interactions. Any way we've been able to influence you. So go ahead and give you a minute for your chat. And as you're bringing that up, as I talked about, these are all mindset and different ways of approaches. I wanted to share a couple of sources that have really helped to me. The book Mindset by Carol Dweck really goes into the growth mindset. I just have found that phenomenal. I'm also a trainer, and she has an education centering, and so that has been super helpful for me. The book Think Again by Adam Grant. I just really love all things Adam Grant, so he's a heavy influencer of me. These are both behavioral science books, so really in that mindset and different ways to approach things. But I felt like, because I am a very tactical person, I wanted to share a couple of tactical sources. I loved the book Liftoff. It was a source that really helped me apply Agile project management in the world, in my job, where I was at that day. It was something I could pick up and I could apply the next day. I have found that to be a terrific source for the Agile Project Manager. And don't forget your PMI and your PMI chapter. They've done such a great job in giving, podcasts and events and certifications and learning pathways and other sources. So make sure that you're not just going in to add your PDUs, but, get familiar with the sources that are available online and through your chapters. Get involved in your chapter. Offer to mentor, to speak, use all these things that we've learned about today. And you can do that even to explore your own agility by practicing it with others and bringing these powerful competencies to the table. All right, so we have a few minutes left here. I would love to be part of your tribe. You can get connected with me. I love talking about anything that has to do with agility or product management or people. I am definitely up for a virtual coffee or a conversation if you want to talk through some stuff, so you can connect with me. And just make sure that if you have any questions, I'll hang out here for another few minutes. And I just want to leave you with one last thought. There was a day, actually Carmen, who you heard from, was on my team several years ago. And there was a day when it was one of those days. Might have been one of those weeks. It actually might have been one of those months. And I was pretty discouraged. All of these things that I was talking about today, wasn't feeling like I was on an amplification track, to be safe. And I went to my desk, and she left this little note. I just love this thought. Only dead fish go with the flow. And Jesse, as my coach, she used to always tell me, I'm a truth sayer, don't get fired. But if you're not on the verge of getting fired, you might not be doing enough. And I've always carried that with me, that we have this ability to influence others, but it does take this intentional approach, in our own learning pathway, in our own culture, and having those courageous conversations and be willing to go further. So I hope this has helped you. I know I've enjoyed it. And I thank all of my guest speakers who helped put this last session together as well. Charlotte says, no dead fish. All right. Well, I will hang out here, but thank you everyone very much. And I think that's it for the day. And then Lynn, you can take over.
Thank you so much, Julie. I enjoyed your talk so much, and I'm over here cracking up about the only dead fish go with the flow. That is such good advice, and I already sent to a couple coworkers as well. Don't say maybe if you want to say no, because I think we all could learn from that. So thank you to everyone who's still out there with us. I know that personally over the last 2 days, I've received a lot of validation. I've also was able to learn a lot and dust off those things that have just been in my brain, but I forgot about. So it's been a great couple days. I challenge everyone to continue the learning and watch our recorded sessions and use social media by using the hashtag ProDevDay2021 to continue those conversations.